We would like to welcome Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy to the table with Otis Sanford, our political analyst. Thank you so much for making time. I know it's probably a busy day.
It is a busy day. It's a day. Not too busy for you guys.
All right, so the president is in town. Did you have a chance to listen to how he addressed the Memphis Safe Task Force?
I did not. Okay. I was actually doing my job, but I have heard some reports about what he has said, so I have the general gist.
Okay, so I know that your office has probably had a lot of cases thrown your way, dealing with a lot since the task force came into town. So how are you all handling the load?
Well, it has been an increased load. I mean, early on for the first couple of months in the federal task force deployment, we were seeing a 50% increase in our daily general sessions docket, which is not trivial. But our staff has been handling it. You know, we've been doing, 90%. You know, they talked about over 7,000 arrests since it started. Over 90% of those cases have been prosecuted by our office and are continuing to be prosecuted by office without any extra help. And we're not complaining, but we're doing the job. And it has been a strain on the general sessions clerks. It's been a strain on the jail, but we are keeping up.
There was a lot of discussion, obviously, about fighting crime at this roundtable.
Yes.
I didn't hear a lot of criticism directed at you until the end. And that criticism came from a citizen.
Yes.
Miss Delicia Ballinger.
Yes.
Who sort of went at you a little bit about what you are not doing to help solve the crime problem. What is your reaction to what she said?
So I didn't hear her remarks. I heard about them. And I noticed that she used certain catchphrases like Soros-funded DA that indicated that she almost certainly was getting fed certain catchphrases from certain political people, right? So I think
you care to say who these certain political figures
I
are?
think you could probably guess just as much as me. So, I mean, I think she was planted there for a particular purpose. As far as I know, she has never interacted with our office. She's not a victim or a witness or anything like that. She doesn't have direct experience with our office. So, all I can tell you is that we are doing the job. I will just tell you this. I said a moment ago that 90% of these federal task force cases are being handled by our office. That is definitely true. I think people need to understand that violent crime was rising steadily for a decade under my Republican predecessor. And in my first year in office, it finally started to come down. Not just violent crime, but all categories of crime. Now we're talking about 9 consecutive quarters of double-digit percentage decrease in crime across all categories up until this day, and that includes 2 full years before the federal task force even got here. And I think that part of the crime decline is clearly to the credit of local law enforcement and my hardworking staff. And that's part of the story. My understanding is you didn't hear much at that airport press conference. And I think that's worth saying.
So when we talk about the federal task force, it is a heavy just assistance on the enforcement side. But was there ever conversation to have some assistance on the legal side?
No. Well, what I call the back end.
Yes.
Right? So on the front end, law enforcement boosts the arrests, okay? That's fine, but you need help on the back end. You need prosecutors, you need the clerk's office, which is overwhelmed, you need jail space, you need a judicial capacity, courts, and we hadn't had any consultation about any of that, none of that help, and I'd like to see help on the back end as well as the front end. Now, I just heard that just today there was a bill filed by Senator Paul Rose in Nashville
to bring back a judge.
2 judges devoted to violent crime, plus extra prosecutors and criminal investigators to staff those courts. I think that is long overdue, and I congratulate Senator Paul Rose for that, and I certainly hope that they pay some attention to that.
I think Senator Taylor might be part of that sponsorship of that bill.
He has a different bill that returns just 1 criminal court judge.
Oh, okay.
And Senator Rose's bill, in my view, is preferable because it gives us 2 judges, and it also gives us the prosecutor and criminal investigator staff we need to staff those judges. And I'll just point out, Pepper and Otis, the Comptroller General did a study in 2025 focused just a few months ago, just on our criminal justice system. And it pointed out that our caseload was greater than the next 3 most populous counties combined: Davidson, Hamilton, and Knox. Combined.
Wow.
Now, those 3 counties combined have 12 criminal court judges to our 9. It used to be 10, but they took it away. While complaining about a backlog, they took away 1/10 of our judicial capacity. And those 3 populous counties combined have 150 prosecutors to our 120. So I certainly hope that Paul Rose's bill is what they decided to put.
You correctly mentioned that crime has been going down,
Yes.
was going down long before the task force got
Yes.
here. And,
Yes.
and of course, a lot of people have said that. I've said that as well.
Yes.
But there is a certain state senator who when Pepper was asked him about that on Friday, said that, well, yes, it was going down before, but I'm taking some credit for it.
He's taking all the credit for it.
Well, he was talking specifically about some bills that he introduced and got passed. He was also talking about making sure that the city council did not go through with the pretextual stops. So who is to be credited for the crime going down?
The crime going down is to be credited to a hardworking local law enforcement. And I think also secondarily to my hardworking staff. They should get the primary credit. Now, you never can pin something as complex as crime on any one thing. So were there economic factors, were there demographic factors that were beyond our control that were helping? Certainly. Crime was going down across the country, right? So you don't pin it on any one person or any one entity, on everybody, all of us working together, the judges, the prosecutors, local law enforcement, our county and city partners, the state as well. But as to what you just asked about Senator Taylor's bills, the pretextual stop bill couldn't have really had that much of an effect on crime because A, it wasn't quite clear that the Memphis Police Department really did stop doing pretextual stops, right?
Right.
And also the data from across the country shows that pretextual stops, only about 2% of the time do you actually catch drugs or guns. So that's not really the crime driver. Whether we do it or not is not crime driving it. The other legislation that he crows about didn't take effect until the middle of 2024, right? Which is several quarters after the crime decline started. So for him to take all the credit or most of the credit for the pre-task force crime decline is just belied by the facts.
And he has another one that he mentioned when we sat down with him on Friday that he's working with the support of Senator Marsha Blackburn. And that was the fact that you would have to then report any task force arrests that you're trying to charge either less and please clarify it for me.
What he says is that every single time any one of those over 6,000, 7,000 cases and counting cases from the federal task force is ever settled. Now, across every DA in the country and the federal system, over 90% of cases settle. Right? So for almost all of those thousands of cases, we're going to have to pull them out and identify them separately from all the other cases that we have and report every single time we settle any one of those cases. Now, in the original version, it was every 24 hours.
1 second. I'm
Sure.
so sorry to interrupt you. Looks
I heard
like
this guy.
President Donald Trump is leaving Graceland, so let's listen in for his final comments.
Thank you, President.
Right.
Thank you, President.
Couldn't quite hear the last part, but he said thank you.
I think he said something like DA Mulroy is great. Did I hear him say that?
Well,
I'm not
he
sure.
finished his trip to Graceland, and we'll be tracking to see if he's headed back to the airport. I believe we expected him to make his way out by 3 o'clock, but we may not have expected him to make a stop at Graceland. But back to what you were saying.
So just to finish up real quick, because we don't want to spend too much time on it, but every single time within 24 hours we ever settle any one of those cases, we have to pull that out. Now, the computer systems for the clerk's office and the DA's office, they don't track those things separately. So there's no way to automate this. So this is going to be a very labor-intensive process. We're going to have to look in and see which ones are federal task force cases and which ones are the many, many independent local law enforcement cases and report them out separately. It'll be incredibly burdensome. My understanding is that they were thinking about some amendments to try to make it less burdensome. I had asked for monthly reporting. Apparently that's too much to ask for. I'd asked for some extra staff to help us deal with it. Apparently that's too much to ask for. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know this. Here's the important thing. We are treating the federal task force cases the same as our local independent law enforcement cases. There's no difference. An ag assault is an ag assault. So I don't know why we have to bend over backwards and spend all this staff time teasing out those cases to report them separately. And I think the answer is because Nashville is going to make me do it. And I will, of course, comply with the law.
Let me ask you a macro question here, sort of like a 35,000-foot question here, because a lot of this just seems to be mired in politics.
You think?
And of course, you ran as a Democrat
Sure.
for the county commission.
Right?
You ran as a Democrat for the Attorney General.
Sure.
But now that you are in this role, it just seems to me that you are still being dragged into a lot of politics and you're having to defend things from a political standpoint. How do you speak to the public about the need to sort of keep politics out of what you're doing?
An excellent point, Otis, and it is absolutely essential that we try to depoliticize some of this stuff, because crime and justice, really, there's no Democratic or Republican thing to it. We all want public safety. And I think the fact that I'm the first Democrat to be elected to Shelby County DA in modern history has gotten some people a little unhinged. And they have been coming after me relentlessly for partisan attacks. Even before I got sworn in, there were Republican politicians who were talking about removing me from office. So it's clearly political. I heard Senator Taylor on your show on Friday, right? And he was saying something about, the December statistics show that some great percentage of cases were violent cases, that we didn't get any jail time. It's just not true. Okay, a big chunk of those cases were nonviolent cases. Another big chunk of them were cases where the person did get jail time. They just got it in jail before the conviction, on a time served deal. So we're talking about very misleading stuff. And then, of course, other big chunks of them were either situations where there was no significant criminal history, or the judge ordered something that we didn't agree with. So, it's very, very misleading.
But a brief follow-up to that, though, is whether it's fair or not, Senator Taylor and others have succeeded in creating a perception that you are soft on crime. And I don't know how effective you have been trying to fight back against that perception.
Well, easier said than done, Otis. You try doing it.
Otis, yeah, you're going for it.
If you have a relentless campaign by those in power and who have access to huge megaphones to relentlessly say that, of course there's going to be some erosion in perception. But I will tell you this. You take a look at the comments on his own social media posts, or in the newspapers and stuff. I think people are coming around to this is political. I think they understand that. People on the street all the time come up to me, and strangers will come up and say, keep doing what you're doing, we're behind you, don't listen to all that stuff. I think there is a perception thing. I think there's going to be a hardcore right-wing base that will always believe whatever he says, no matter what. And that's true nationally, it's true here. But I think a lot of people in Shelby County are hip to what's really going on.
Now, we do talk about the Memphis Safe Task Force. There's huge messaging around violent criminals.
Sure.
But can you speak to the cases that you all handle where maybe it's not so violent, or how many of those are not violent cases, and how many people are really...
Sure. So the overwhelming majority, a large majority of the federal task force arrests have been for nonviolent crimes.
Have been for nonviolent.
For nonviolent crimes.
Nonviolent.
That's right, yes. So there's about 20% of them are immigration related. And as we know, the Institute for Public Service Reporting just came out with a great article today. Over 90% of those immigration arrests, there was no other crime.
Right.
It was just unlawful presence in the United States. So these are hardworking, tax-paying people who've lived here for decades, have not committed any other crime, and are being removed, right? About 20% immigration. A large percentage are vehicle related. So either traffic or DUI or reckless driving, things of that nature. Now, there have been some violent crime. There's a good chunk of them that have been assault arrests. And I want to give the federal task force credit. A lot of what they've done has been to serve outstanding warrants. We have a huge backlog of outstanding warrants, and they've helped with that. And I'll give them credit for that. They have done that. But this notion that it's, all violent crime, that's not true. That the immigrants that are being rounded up are the worst of the worst. That's not true. And, I frankly think that the immigration arrests can actually be counterproductive, because you have a Latino and immigrant community and those that care about them that are so terrorized that they're not cooperating with law enforcement. They're not reporting crimes, serving as witnesses, providing tips, because they don't want any contact with the criminal justice system for fear that someone they love is going to get deported. And that really hurts our ability to deal with regular crime, the crime that we all care about.
I do think that this side hasn't been reported on so much when we get past the arrests and how you all are actually trying these cases or getting to the weeds of it. So I do appreciate you being here for a little more clarity to this side.
Yeah. Yeah. I will, one other thing, if I could, just
No,
real
yeah,
quick.
I think we still have a few more minutes. I
Okay.
just wanted to give you some
No,
kudos.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That December data that he's been talking about. Some of the complaint was supposedly that we were dismissing too many cases. So we went ahead and we took a look. And we did an apples to apples comparison for December data under my Republican predecessor. And to be fair, we went before the pandemic. And do you know what we found? We found that our dismissal rate was higher. Our dismissal rate was lower. And our conviction rate was higher. So you mentioned before, is this political, is this partisan? You tell me, you have Republican politicians in D.C. and Nashville not saying anything about my Republican predecessor, even though violent crime had been rising steadily for a decade and they had, as looks like, lower conviction rates and higher dismissal rates. And then the first Democrat in modern history in Shelby County is elected, and immediately they start talking about removing him, even though crime has been dropping steadily, right, for over 2.5, 3 years. Does that sound like it's partisan politics to you? It sure does to me.
Well, let me ask you to put your crystal ball on here.
All right.
And let's look out a year, 2 years, or let's look out to when you're up for re-election, which I think is 2030.
2030.
Where do you see crime? Because you are a person who follows trends. And so if it's continuing to trend, where do you see crime, say, by 2029?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. I am expecting, and I knock wood as I speak, the downward trend in crime to continue for at least several more quarters. That has been the national trend, and we tend to follow the national trend just a little bit behind, right?
Okay.
But can we guarantee that it won't flatten out anytime in the next 4 years? No, unfortunately, we can't. We're just, we're going to do the best we can to do everything we can to keep pushing that curve down. But, what happens 4 or 5 years from now, even I can't figure that out.
Okay, I have to interrupt real quick. We don't want you to go away just yet. We're going to come back out to you, D.A. Mulroy, but we're seeing President Trump's motorcade making its way back to the airport.